Hello everybody, Mannix here. It's time for another tabletop knife review, but first feel free to subscribe, hit that little bell notification if you do not want to miss weekly knife and gun videos. This is one I've seen for a very long time. I've had a lot of cold steels. This is one I kept looking at for years and years and just never pulled the trigger on it. But finally, one day, a sale came up, and I decided it was time. Here it is, the Cold Steel Frenzy. This one takes inspiration from the Japanese Kabutowari. Some call this a Wharncliffe blade, but actually it's on a slight reverse curve. It's not entirely flush. So some may call this a hawkbill blade, but if you know me, I really don't give a crap about blade style names because everybody's got 10 million different names for each blade style, so it's whatever you want. It's just not completely flush. It's on a very slight reverse curve. It kind of looks like a Wharncliffe, but it's not 100% straight. As you can see, it's very slim. Although the blade itself and the spine is thick, the width of it is just about as slim as the handle right here, and it's very slim overall. Slim G10 handle scales. No liners in there whatsoever as far as I know. We got either a Grivex or possibly even an aluminum backspacer right there. Triad locking mechanism. S35VN blade steel, by the way. It is satin finish. Tip up carry. The pocket clip is swappable to the left side, and it's a symmetrical pocket clip. Unlike a lot of other cold steels where they'll give you two pocket clips to accommodate either side, they just give you one like most other companies do. It kind of looks like a Spyderco hourglass. Seems to be tumbled or stonewashed. You can see a nice little hole cut out in there to accommodate the G10 handle scales as well, so you have a lanyard hole. And I love it when knife companies do this, when they actually cut out a portion of the handle scale to accommodate the pocket clip so it mounts in there nice and flush rather than resting directly on top of it, so it has room to swivel around if any of the screws lighten up. Not that that's super common, there are 3 screws in here, but regardless, I just love seeing that, so good job. And of course, the colors. This one happens to be the blue and the black, and you can see some cutouts right here in the G10 as well. So we have a little pattern going on there for texture and whatnot. We have the typical Cold Steel signature failed jimping on the spine of the handle scales right here. It's better than not having them whatsoever, I suppose, but it's not very effective. If you've had any other Cold Steels where they do this, you pretty much know exactly what to expect at this point. Your thumb's pretty much just going to be sliding on that lock bar for the triad lock. Fat of my thumb is kind of digging into those cutouts a little bit, but it's not very effective at all. Again, I suppose it's better than not having them, but whatever. Thumb studs, they look kind of like reverse Reese's peanut butter cups. I love these shapes, actually. It's like a cone where they just cut off the tippy top of it so it's not pointy. Great. Thumb studs, I have no issues with them whatsoever. I kind of like how they're big and fat, nice and jimped on the edges right there, as you can see. Knife deploys just fine conventionally, deploys just fine quickly. No ball bearings, just washers. I'm not sure what kinds offhand, probably phosphorus bronze. I didn't take this apart. Very slim, very lightweight, very long. Carries just fine. This pocket clip, again, it's like the Spyderco pocket clips, and I love those clips. Tension's perfect on it. A lot of cold steels out there have very tight pocket clips accompanied with very aggressive texturing on the handle scales. These are smooth handle scales, and the pocket clip is not that tight. It is a little bit low riding, so there's going to be quite a bit poking out there. That doesn't bother me too much. A lot of people like the loop over clips, but this is not, so just take it for what it's worth. You at least have a lot to grip onto, so it's going to be very easy to extract this knife and deploy it as well. Let's get the specs out of the way. Cold Steel's official website claims this is 5.7 ounces. The blade thickness is 3.5 millimeters. The blade length, 5.5 inches. Handle length, 6 3/4 inches, making the overall length. See, this is funny. Their website says 12 to 14 inches. But if we do a little math, turns out it should be 12 1/4 or 12.25 inches. Let's look at that overall length. 12 to 14 inches. Cold Steel, could you please clean up your website? I always have to get these specs manually. Now, as for 5.7 ounces, let's clarify that one as well. That's what my scale is saying anyway. 5.74. Okay, so they actually weren't too far off there. It's a sub 6 ounce folder for just about a 5.5 inch blade. That's very light. Again, that's going to have a lot to do with the fact that there's no steel liners in there. It's just straight up G10, and we have a very slim blade overall. Very slim, long knife. I would still classify this as an extra large size folder just because it's so long. It's not quite as wide and fat as many of the other cold steels, but we still have a lot of reach to work with here. Retails at $239.99, but generally speaking, I see these go for around the $100 range, give or take. I happened to find this on sale for about $80 a couple of months ago, but generally around $100 is more consistently what I see these go for. Sometimes $110, $120. So I would not call this a cheap knife. It's not that expensive either. I mean, if Benchmade made this, they'd probably charge for like $360 for it or something. So a $100 bill or so, that's not the end of the world. A lot of Spydercos out there that are half the size that have the same materials are almost double the price as well. So you could do a lot worse. It is made in Taiwan. You make this in the US, again, you're going to be increasing that price even more. We have a nice fuller right there too. It's beautiful. I'm going to stick this guy strictly in the tactical category of use. Although the triad lock is on there, and if you're familiar with that, it's extremely strong, one of the strongest locking mechanisms in the world. It's basically just an improved lock back. You have a much deeper notch cut out in the tang of the blade, and then you have an integral stop pin which absorbs basically all of the positive force going on the cutting edge. Negative force that goes on the spine gets transferred to the lock bar, just like it would any lock back, but that then gets transferred to the stop pin. Long story short, it's an extremely strong, so I'm still going to say it's a very strong knife, but because our blade is thin, even with the thick spine, the overall profile of it, I still would not call this a very strong blade shape. It's not very wide or stout. It's not a cleaver. It's not a sheep's foot. It's very, very slim. It's going to be great for poking. It's very, very acute. It's going to be great for stabbing and just great for slashing because we are on that slight reverse curve right there. So the material is actually going to get caught up even deeper as you make a cut with this. It's just how that works. But even if there was no reverse curve, a straight up flush Wharncliffe also is very great for that. A lot of knife fighters out there swear by the Wharncliffe blade shape over a typical clip point, drop point, etc. Not saying it's objectively better than those, but what I'm saying is these blade styles in general are known for being good for tactical use, self-defense, martial use, etc. I'm not a knife fighter. Don't take my word for it. You can do this research yourself. Maybe talk to an actual knife fighter, see what they say. But generally speaking, from what I understand, this is a good knife fighting blade shape. The fact that this one's so thin, it's going to be very swift, and because it's very light, it's very mobile. It's a very, very good knife for fighting and defense. It's just not very strong. We are sacrificing some strength there, but if you're not using this for hard use, it doesn't really matter, and that's not what this knife's calling is for. We have plenty of cold steels out there that are wide and fat and are great for hard work, that are just bomb-proof. They can withstand anything. This is not that knife, and the fact that we have S35VN steel on here instead of what they typically use, AUS-10A, for their cheaper stuff, generally speaking, it's going to be a lot more brittle. So that means this is going to shatter a lot easier than, say, AUS-10A. AUS-10A will not hold an edge nearly as long as this one will, but it will also withstand more shock and torque, etc. But of course, the advantage to S35VN is the insanely high edge retention, rust resistance, corrosion resistance. It's a great working blade steel. And for self-defense and martial use, when you're typically cutting through flesh and clothing, you don't really need a blade steel that's tough and strong, I don't think. So the fact that they went with the S35VN on this type of knife for this particular context, I think that's totally fine. Because even if you did have AUS-10A or something softer that can withstand more stress, if you were using a knife like this for that type of task, you'd probably have problems with the blade chipping or snapping anyway because it's so thin. So I'm kind of glad Cold Steel just kind of went all out with this one and just stuck with a very brittle blade steel because it's not meant for hard use. That's a subjective term. Everybody's got a different definition of that, but I think they made a very good choice here. We have a very high edge retention blade, very hard steel, but that is going to increase the price. You know, if they did go with the AUS-10A on this bad boy, it would probably be, I'd assume, maybe like $70, something like that. But we're adding a good 30, 35, maybe even $45 on this guy simply because of that blade steel. That's just how that goes. But again, it's really good looking. I like the choice of it. I do like the blade shape. I like the design. I love these cutouts in the G10 right here. Obviously the pattern, the black and the blue looks great together. Got a little slope right here so your thumb can kind of slide down like a kid going down a slide. Wee! And then make contact with that thumb stud, open it up. And I like how it's not 100% smooth. We do, again, have some cutouts right here. So we have some grip added just a little bit. A nice little choil right down here. I usually hold it in this position. If you wanted maximum reach, I would just go for something like that. You can throw a lanyard on there. Obviously, you can go even lower if you wanted and get even more leverage because of that lanyard. But I'm just going to do this. And then, of course, you can choke up on it. Utilize that jimping, so to speak, if you are using this for work. This would be great for pole cutting or cutting fibrous materials, rope, stuff like that because of that pseudo hawkbill, whatever you want to call it, blade style, reverse curve, Wharncliffe, something or other. So although I did say it's meant for martial use, it still has its utility purposes. It's just not meant for that. It's very, very cumbersome and very long. Most utility tasks, I doubt, would need this much length. But if it's all you had, you know, it'll work. Ergonomics, it's not melt in my hand or anything. You know, usually I prefer thicker handles. I like how they're more hand-filling. It feels like you just grabbed onto a chunk of clay or something. This is not that. It's not the most comfortable knife, but you can get a good pinch grip on this. That is an advantage to slim handles. Some people prefer the slimmer handles because of that, actually. They feel like they get better control because the pressure of your hand is not divided in as much surface area. It's just not the most comfortable knife I've ever held. It's a very versatile design overall, despite us having some choils here and there, as you can see. It'll work in a lot of different positions, even goofy, weird positions. For whatever reason, if you had to do that, it won't be uncomfortable in any particular position, even though it's not melt in your hand either. I'd call this a very versatile, long, lightweight knife. Very, very lightweight. I've been carrying this a lot lately, and it is a dream. It carries like a dream. I forget it's on me. It's so slim, so it doesn't take up too much space in your pocket. You don't feel it bulging out there or anything. Again, although it's not on ball bearings, it deploys just fine, very fast, just like all the XL cold steels do. They always do such a great job on their deployment. Again, despite usually not using ball bearings. They're starting to put ball bearings on some of their knives, but even the ones that they still don't, they still deploy just fine. You just need a little bit of a wrist flick right there. Without a wrist flick, oh, that still worked that time, actually. I wasn't even trying. Yeah, it's even working without a wrist flick. That's very impressive without ball bearings, but still, to be absolutely sure, I just like to thwack it, just like I do with all knives. There's a little bit of side to side in this one. I didn't really adjust it out, but there's no up and down, just like most knives with the triad locks. So although the locking mechanism is very strong, again, the blade shape is not, just because it's thin and it's brittle because it's S35VN, so I wouldn't torque or pry or twist with this thing. But lightweight, swift, carries well, great defensive knife, and not terribly expensive either. You know, I certainly wouldn't call it a cheap knife. I'd call it a fair value knife. You know, there's knives that that are way more than this one, where you get, I think, way less, honestly, for the money. So not bad at all for a crisp $100 bill. If you like this design, you just want to throw it into the Cold Steel collection or the XL knife collection you got going, or you just want some swift, long, lightweight defensive blade. You like the Warncliffs, you like the Hawkbills. There's a lot of different reasons to get this knife, and I love the style of it too. This is very, very cool looking, obviously. So great knife. I'm actually a huge fan. So there you go. That is the Cold Steel Frenzy. Really, really cool knife. And it certainly is more unique than most of the other Cold Steels out there. Thank you so much for watching. Mannix out.